My dad promised my 9-year-old son he'd inherit everything, then I found out he gave the house to my sister and filed for emergency custody behind my back. I thought I was just having a nice night at a fancy gala. But then, my daughter whispered something. That plunged me into a nightmare. My own parents and ex-husband weren't just trying to steal my family legacy. They were trying to erase me and take my son right out from under me. Mom, we need to leave. Now. Sage's urgent whisper cut through the polite hum of the Harwood Hotel. Ballroom like a knife. I looked down, my 15-year-old daughter's face utterly pale beneath the glittering crystal chandeliers, her knuckles white as she gripped her iPhone. What's wrong, honey? I asked, setting my champagne flute on a passing tray. Sage glanced nervously over her shoulder, then thrust her phone into my hand. I found these in Dad's briefcase when he asked me to grab his glasses. Just look. The screen glowed with photographs of legal documents. As I swiped through them, my hands began to tremble. Blood rushed in my ears, drowning out the orchestra and the distant laughter of 180 impeccably dressed guests. Are these? My voice faltered, the words on the page finally coming into focus. Asterisk trust amendments. Property transfers. Custody petitions. Asterisk. They're planning to give the Lake Lodge to Dad and Tessa, Sage whispered, her voice barely audible, over the sudden roaring in my head. And they want to make Rowan live with them full-time. I leaned against a cold marble column, the room spinning. The Lake Lodge, my childhood sanctuary, worth nearly $1.5 million, being handed to Derek, my ex-husband, and his new wife, and my 9-year-old son, effectively being stolen from me. The documents bore my father's letterhead. Marshall Harwood. My own father. He was orchestrating all of it. My parents, asterisk my own parents, asterisk, conspiring with my ex-husband to erase me from the family legacy. The annual Harwood Hotel's gala continued around us, completely oblivious to my world imploding. Across the room, I spotted my father, deep in conversation with Derek and Tessa. My mother stood beside them, her hand resting on Derek's arm as she laughed at something he said. They looked like a perfect, happy family. A perfect, happy family without me. Where's Rowan? I demanded, scanning the crowd, a frantic edge to my voice. Grandpa took him to show off to the board members, Sage's voice cracked. He told Rowan that someday he'd run everything. 10 years of marriage had ended when I discovered Derek's affair with Tessa Blackwell, whose family owned the private equity firm that had been eyeing Harwood Hotels for years. The betrayal had been devastating enough, but my parents' reaction had been worse, a subtle, infuriating blame, as if I had somehow driven Derek to cheat. I'd moved the children to a modest duplex in Ann Arbor, cobbling together income from freelance textile projects and a part-time position at the History Museum. Meanwhile, my parents showered Rowan with extravagant gifts, a junior golf membership, a custom laptop, even a small trust fund, while barely acknowledging Sage's dance competitions or academic achievements. I'd told myself they just connected better with Rowan, that it wasn't deliberate favoritism, but these documents told a different story. This wasn't thoughtlessness. This was calculated exclusion. Find your brother, I told Sage, surprised by the steely calm in my voice. Tell him we're leaving. Meet me by the coat check in 5 minutes. I crossed the ballroom floor, weaving between oblivious guests until I spotted Rowan standing beside my father, wearing a miniature version of Derek's tuxedo. My heart twisted at how much he resembled his father. Rowan, honey? Sage isn't feeling well. We need to head home. My father's smile faltered. But Laurel, we haven't announced the succession plans yet. Everyone's expecting. We know exactly what you're planning, Dad. The words came out stronger than I expected, years of swallowed hurt finally finding a voice. His eyes narrowed, darting toward where Derek stood with my mother and Tessa. Within seconds, they moved to stand beside him, a united front against me. The choreography of their movement confirmed everything. They'd been planning this for months, perhaps years. Laurel, be reasonable, my mother said, her smile fixed and brittle. We're thinking of what's best. For the family. Which family members exactly? I asked, taking Rowan's hand, pulling him closer. Derek stepped forward. This isn't the place for a scene. For once, we agree. I turned toward the exit where Sage waited, her shoulders squared despite the fear in her eyes. As I guided my children through the crowd, I felt something inside me shift. The part of me that always sought my parents' approval, that avoided conflict at all costs, began to crumble away. In its place rose something fiercer, something protective and uncompromising. They'd made their choice. Now I'd make mine. Later that night, the duplex felt hollow as we returned from the gala, our footsteps echoing against the hardwood floors that desperately needed refinishing. Rowan headed straight to bed, exhausted by the night's tension, while Sage paced the kitchen, still clutching her phone. There's more, she whispered, her fingers trembling as she unlocked her screen. I took pictures of everything I found. The cold kitchen counter pressed against my palms as I steadied myself, scanning through each document Sage had captured. My breath caught when I reached a page with my father's elegant signature at the bottom. Trust revisions. Not just for the Lake Lodge, but for everything. They're cutting me out completely, Sage said, her voice breaking. Grandpa's revised the family trust. Rowan gets everything when he turns 25. I get nothing. I gripped the counter edge so hard my fingers ached. The implications crashed over me like waves. This wasn't just about property or custody. It was erasure. My daughter, written out of her own family's legacy as if she never existed. Why would they do this? Sage asked, wiping angrily at her eyes. Before I could answer, a gentle knock at our front door made us both jump. My Aunt Corinne stood on the porch, her silver hair gleaming under the porch light. The worry in her eyes told me she already knew. I left right after you did, she explained, settling onto our worn sofa. Unlike my mother's stiff posture when she visited, Corinne leaned in, her hand finding mine. I've seen this before, Laurel. Your father did the same thing to my sister, Phoebe, 20 years ago. Phoebe? The name felt foreign on my tongue, a family ghost. We never talk about her. Corinne nodded grimly. That's by design. Marshall has always been obsessed with controlling the family legacy. Anyone who challenges him gets erased. But why target Sage? I asked, my voice barely audible, heartbroken for my daughter. Because she's like you, independent, questioning, Corinne said. And because Derek made a deal. He gets the lodge and increased custody of Rowan in exchange for helping Marshall streamline the family inheritance. Sage's face paled. Dad agreed to cut me out? Your grandfather has done this twice before, Corinne continued. First with Phoebe when she married someone he disapproved of, then with your cousin James when he chose art school instead of business. She leaned closer. Marshall calls it legacy cleansing. Removing complications from the family line. The words landed like blows. Complications, as if my daughter was nothing more than an inconvenient footnote. They'll try for full custody of Rowan next, Corinne warned, her voice grave. Derek's already filed paperwork claiming your financial instability makes you an unfit parent. My fingers curled into fists. They can't prove that. They've already enrolled Rowan in Lakeside Academy for the fall semester, Corinne said quietly. It's 5 minutes from Derek's new house with Tessa. The room spun slightly. Lakeside Academy, the exclusive private school where generations of Harwoods had attended. Where my father sat on the board of trustees. They've been planning this for months, I whispered, memories reshuffling like cards. The sudden invitations for Rowan to spend weekends with his grandparents. Derek's unexpected flexibility with custody schedules when it involved my parents. Years, possibly, Corinne said softly. Tessa's family has wanted a partnership with Harwood Hotels since before you and Derek even met. The implication hung in the air between us, suffocating. Had my entire marriage been strategic? A business arrangement disguised as love? After Corinne left, I sat alone in the dark, Sage finally asleep upstairs. My laptop glowed as I logged into an old cloud account Derek and I once shared, one he probably forgot existed. My fingers moved mechanically, searching through folders until I found what I was looking for: email archives. One from my father to Derek, dated 3 years ago. Remember our arrangement. Patience will be rewarded. Another from Derek to Tessa, shortly before our divorce. Everything's proceeding according to plan. Marshall promises the lodge and increased custody once things are finalized. My hands no longer trembled as I downloaded and saved each damning piece of evidence. A strange calm settled over me, the kind that comes when fear burns so hot it crystallizes into something harder, something resilient. As I read through Derek's emails that night, I faced a critical choice: confront my parents immediately with what I'd found, or quietly build a case with legal help first. Direct confrontation might satisfy my anger, but patience might protect my children better. What would you do when those who should protect you become the greatest threat? 2 days later, the letter from Derek's attorney arrived on crisp legal stationery, the morning sun, casting shadows across words that stole my breath. Asterisk emergency custody motion. Allegations of parental unavailability. Court date next month. Asterisk my hands trembled as I read further. Asterisk temporary. Supervised visitation until proceedings conclude. Asterisk. I called my supervisor at the museum immediately. Christine, I need to take a personal day. Everything okay? Concern colored her voice. Legal issues. My voice sounded hollow, distant. My ex-husband filed for emergency custody of Rowan. The document outlined Derek's claims in meticulous detail: my erratic work schedule, financial instability, and emotional unpredictability following the divorce. But what turned my blood cold was the addendum. My parents had submitted sworn affidavits supporting his petition. My mother's statement described finding Rowan unwashed and wearing the same clothes 2 days in a row during a weekend visit. My father questioned my emotional stability to parent effectively, citing an incident where I broke down crying at a family dinner 3 months after discovering Derek's affair. That evening, the phone rang. My father's number. "Laurel, we're only trying to help," he said. Without preamble, "Derek has a point about your work schedule between the museum and your little craft projects. Textile restoration," I corrected automatically, a raw edge to my voice. "And I'm home every day when the kids return from school. Rowan needs a stable male influence. You know how boys are at this age." I hung up without responding. My rage simmered, a quiet but intense fire. The next morning, Rowan's principal called during my shift. I stepped into the break room to take it. "Mrs. McKinney, we're concerned about Rowan's recent behavior," she began. He pushed another student during recess and told the counselor that real families stay together and that a man's responsibility is to protect the family name. I closed my eyes, recognizing my father's exact phrasing. "Has anything changed at home recently?" she asked gently. Everything, I wanted to say. Instead, I scheduled a meeting for tomorrow. That night, I found Rowan's homework incomplete. His responses to his teacher's questions were single-word and sullen. When I asked about school, he stared at his plate. "Grandpa says I shouldn't have to do busy work. He says I'll be running hotels someday." Sleep eluded me. Each night, I lay awake cataloging every potential mistake, every moment that could be twisted in court. I started leaving the museum during lunch breaks to check on the children at school. My hands shook as I measured fabric for a restoration project, ruining an entire bolt of vintage silk. My supervisor noticed, suggested I take some time off. "You look exhausted, Laurel." I couldn't afford time off. I couldn't afford anything that might support Derek's claims. 3 mornings after receiving notice of our court date, I purchased a digital recorder. When Derek called to discuss weekend plans, I pressed record before answering. "We're not doing this anymore," I told him, placing the device visibly on the kitchen counter. "Every conversation between us will be documented from now on." His laugh sounded forced. "Paranoid much?" "Prepared," I corrected him. "For supervised visitation this weekend, I'll meet you at the community center at 10. The recorder became my constant companion. I documented every exchange with my parents, every school pickup, every meal preparation. I took photos of completed homework, clean bedrooms stocked, refrigerators. I started a spreadsheet tracking Rowan's behavioral incidents, noting the correlation with visits to his grandparents. One evening, Sage sat cross-legged on the living room floor, surrounded by old photo albums I'd rescued during the divorce. "Mom, look at this." She held up a yellowed photograph. A young woman, with my eyes and my mother's chin, stood beside a Christmas tree, arms slung around a teenage version of my father. "Is this Aunt Phoebe?" I took the photo, studying the woman I hadn't seen since I was 12. Yes, Dad's younger sister. There was an address and phone number on the back. I turned it over, recognizing my grandmother's elegant handwriting. An address in Seattle. A phone number I'd never called. Sage looked up from her phone, eyes bright. She replied in 10 minutes. "Mom," she said, showing me her screen. "She says she's been waiting for our call for years." On Saturday afternoon, the cafe I chose for meeting Derek sat equidistant between our homes, busy enough for witnesses, but quiet enough for conversation. I arrived early, selecting a table near the window. The recorder sat beside my coffee cup, a silent sentinel. Derek arrived 12 minutes late, designer briefcase in hand. His eyes flicked to the recorder, then back to me. "Custody modification is standard in these situations," he began, his voice professionally neutral. "With Tessa and me providing a two-parent household." "Why are you doing this?" I interrupted, my voice flat. "You never wanted primary custody before." His jaw tightened. "Rowan needs stability." "He had stability until you started telling him I wasn't good enough." "That's not. You know exactly what you and my parents are doing." I leaned forward, my voice dropping to a fierce whisper. "The question is why you're helping them." Something shifted in his expression, a flicker of something that looked almost like shame. "You'll never win against them," he hissed, his voice dropping further. "I spent 10 years trying to be good enough." The realization washed over me like cold water. Derek wasn't just my husband. He was their project. Their attempt to secure the right kind of son-in-law. His betrayal with Tessa wasn't just about infidelity. It was about failing their expectations, then desperately trying to regain favor. "I don't need to win against them," I said, my voice steadier than I expected. "I just need to protect my children from all of you." For the first time since our divorce, I felt something other than anger toward Derek, a complicated pity for the man still seeking my father's approval. 3 days later, the doorbell rang at 7 a.m. I opened it to find a woman with silver-streaked dark hair and my father's sharp cheekbones. "Phoebe?" I breathed. I caught the first flight from Seattle. She enveloped me in a hug that smelled of unfamiliar perfume and familiar family. I brought everything from when they did this to me. At the kitchen table, she spread documents chronicling her own disinheritance 20 years earlier. The same patterns, a different decade. Unlike my parents who interrupted constantly, Phoebe listened completely, nodding as I detailed the custody petition and property transfers. "Marshall hasn't changed his playbook in decades," she said, sorting papers into neat piles. "Luckily, neither have I." With each passing day, I stood straighter, spoke more confidently, thought more clearly. When a colleague complimented my restored posture, I realized how long I'd been physically diminished by doubt. After extensive research, I hired Monica Trujillo, an attorney with a reputation for battling wealthy families in custody disputes. She studied the recorded conversations with narrowed eyes. "They've made critical mistakes," she said, tapping one transcript. And I heard from a colleague that Tessa's father is threatening to withdraw investment unless Derek exits the litigation. That evening, my phone buzzed with a text from my father. Asterisk family meeting tomorrow. Final chance to be reasonable. Asterisk I looked at Sage completing homework at the dining table, at Phoebe creating a timeline of evidence on my living room wall, at Monica's business card propped against a fresh pot of coffee. For the first time in years, I felt something like power. Next week, the leather chair creaked as I shifted my weight, watching Monica Trujillo spread documents across the polished conference table. Our binder of evidence sat open between us, each tab color-coded and labeled in Sage's neat handwriting. Across the table, my father's attorney, a silver-haired man in a tailored suit, had stopped taking notes. His eyes darted between the documents and my father's increasingly rigid posture. As you can see, Monica said, tapping a printed email chain, we have documented evidence of Mr. Harwood and Mr. McKinney coordinating the transfer of assets specifically to exclude Ms. McKinney and her daughter from the family inheritance. She slid forward a timeline meticulously constructed over 3 sleepless nights. This pattern began approximately 16 months ago, shortly after Mr. McKinney's engagement to Ms. Blackwell. My father's jaw tightened. The conference room felt suddenly airless despite its size. Sage sat beside me, back straight, eyes fixed on her grandfather with an unflinching gaze that made my chest swell with pride. These accusations are absurd, Derek interjected, tugging at his collar. Laurel has always had an artistic temperament. Since the divorce, she's become increasingly paranoid about. About what, Mr. McKinney? Monica interrupted, her voice cool and crisp. About your meetings with her father to discuss how custody of Rowan might be leveraged? Or about the fact that you're new? Father-in-law has threatened to contest your prenuptial agreement unless this litigation is resolved. Quickly, the color drained from Derek's face. My father turned toward him, eyes narrowing to slits. What is she talking about? His voice dropped dangerously low. Monica slid another document across the table. Mr. Blackwell's legal team contacted us yesterday. It seems he's concerned about potential negative publicity affecting their upcoming merger. My father snatched the paper, scanning it quickly. The vein at his temple pulsed as he glared at Derek. For the first time, I saw uncertainty ripple across my father's face. The dawning realization that his carefully constructed plan had a significant weakness, Derek himself. We'll need a brief recess, my father's attorney announced, gathering his notes with trembling fingers. When they returned 20 minutes later, my father looked 10 years older. He cleared his throat and slid a document toward me. We're prepared to maintain your current allowance if you'll accept the new arrangement quietly. It's a generous offer considering the circumstances. I stared at the paper, noting the amount, enough to ease the constant financial pressure to ensure Sage could attend any college she chooses to replace my aging car. The temptation knotted in my stomach, warring with everything that brought me here today. Should I take the financial security and avoid a prolonged fight? Or stand firm, knowing my children were watching how I responded to injustice? My thoughts were interrupted as the conference room door opened. Aunt Phoebe walked in looking remarkably like my mother 30 years ago. Her presence sent a visible shockwave through my parents. I believe I'm expected, she said, pulling out a chair beside me. My mother's face crumpled. Phoebe, you don't understand. Actually, I understand perfectly. Phoebe opened her laptop. In 2003, Marshall Harwood orchestrated nearly identical legal maneuvers to remove me from the family trust. You claimed my lifestyle choices made me unfit to participate in the family legacy. She turned her screen toward the attorneys. I've documented every incident spanning 3 decades, including the disinheritance of Cousin Martin in 1996 for marrying someone you disapproved of. Monica stood, adding, this establishes a clear pattern of manipulative control through financial means. Given these findings, we're prepared to pursue a fiduciary breach lawsuit unless a fair settlement is reached today. My father's attorney leaned over, whispering urgently in his ear. The confident patriarch who ruled our family with absolute authority for 40 years suddenly looked cornered. We only wanted what was best for the family name, my mother said, tears spilling down her cheeks. She reached for a tissue, her perfectly manicured hands trembling. The hotels, the legacy, it all needs to be protected. From what, Mom? I asked quietly. From me? From Sage. From mistakes, my father answered, but his voice lacked its usual conviction. His shoulders slumped forward as Monica mentioned potential tax implications of the trust manipulations. After a hurried conference, my father's attorney suggested moving to the mediation room to discuss settlement terms. As we gathered our materials, I caught Derek checking his phone anxiously, no doubt receiving pressure from his new father-in-law. The walls were closing in on them, just as they once did on me. The difference is, I've learned to stand firm when what matters most is at stake. For the first time since this battle began, I allowed myself to believe we might actually win. Marshall Harwood leaned forward in his Italian leather chair, manicured fingers splayed across the polished conference table. My father's trademark confidence wavered as he slid a folder toward me. A reasonable compromise, he said, his voice steady, but his hand trembling slightly. Sage receives a modest trust. You and Derek share the lodge, with his family having primary usage rights. This preserves everyone's dignity. Beside him, my mother dabbed at her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief, her gaze darting between me and the family portraits lining the mahogany-paneled walls of the Harwood legal offices. Laurel, please, she whispered. Your artistic talents are wonderful, but business matters require different capabilities. Derek checked his phone for the third time in 5 minutes, his jaw clenched tight, the alliances fracturing before my eyes. Monica Trujillo, my attorney, remained silent beside me. We anticipated this, their last desperate gambit before total surrender. And Rowan? I asked, though I already knew the answer. He'll benefit most from Derek's guidance, my father replied. The boy needs stability, structure, male influence. I absorbed the familiar sting of these words. For years, they'd been the background music of my life, the subtle message that I was somehow less than, incomplete, inadequate. But today, that music stopped. I opened my own leather portfolio, removing a document bearing the Harwood Trust Company letterhead. Monica had found it through discovery, the smoking gun we needed. This is an independent evaluation of my financial management since the divorce, I said, sliding it across the table. Conducted by your own bank, Dad. My father's eyes narrowed as he scanned the document. I've outperformed your selected financial advisors by 11%, I continued, my voice gaining strength with each word. I've maintained perfect credit while establishing my business and providing for my children's needs on a fraction of what you consider necessary income. I placed a second document beside it, a profit and loss statement from my textile business, now supplying custom work to 3 museums and a small, but growing online clientele. I'm not accepting crumbs from my own family table, I said, meeting my father's gaze directly. My children deserve their birthright, both of them, equally. The conference room fell silent except for my mother's uneven breathing. On the walls around us, generations of Harwoods stared down from their portraits, stern patriarchs and proper matriarchs, who built the hotel empire from a single roadside inn in 1937. I reached into my bag and removed 3 framed photographs, placing them carefully on the table. Sage's latest dance competition portrait, Rowan's school picture, his smile missing 2 teeth. And between them, a faded photograph of a young woman with my mother's eyes and a hesitant smile. Aunt Phoebe, I said simply. My mother gasped, her hand reaching toward the photo before my father caught her wrist, pulling it back. But I'd seen what I needed to see, the reflexive love, still there after all these years of enforced silence. For 40 years you've decided who belongs in this family, I said, my voice quiet but firm. You erased Phoebe when she married someone you disapproved of. You've been systematically erasing Sage because she reminds you too much of her, and you've been grooming Rowan to become the son you never had. My father's face hardened. This melodrama is. Today that power ends, I interrupted, something I'd never dared to do before. These are my terms. Equal trusts for both my children, full title to the lodge, public acknowledgement of your manipulation, and supervised visitation with my children, yes, supervised, until you demonstrate you can respect their mother and treat both children equally. Derek stood abruptly. This is ridiculous. We're not agreeing to. Tessa's father called me yesterday, Monica interjected smoothly. He mentioned he's prepared to withdraw all financial support if this litigation continues. Something about protecting family reputation. Derek's face strained of color as he sank back into his chair. My father's eyes darted between us, calculating rapidly as the foundation of his plan crumbled. For the first time in my life, I saw something unfamiliar in his expression. Defeat. 30 minutes later, I watched as he signed the agreement, his fountain pen scratching across the paper with angry precision. Derek left without speaking, his shoulders rigid. Later, his attorney would contact Monica to accept 12 months of supervised visitation, citing travel commitments as the reason. As I gathered my belongings, my thoughts turned to Rowan. How would I help him understand what's happened without damaging his relationship with his father? The question weighed heavily as I signed the final documents. When I stepped into the lobby, I found my mother waiting alone, clutching Phoebe's photograph to her chest like a precious artifact. Is she happy? She asked, her voice small and uncertain. The question caught me off guard, not accusation or defense, but genuine concern. For the first time, I saw my mother as she truly is, a woman who allowed fear and control to cost her a daughter. I hesitated, balancing truth against mercy, wondering if some wounds can begin healing even after decades of neglect. A year later, the sunlight streams through leaded glass windows, casting honeycomb patterns across my new living room floor. The Craftsman bungalow sits just 6 blocks from the museum, with enough space for each of us to breathe. I run my fingers along the oak banister, still marveling that this place is truly mine. Where does this box go? Sage calls from the entryway, hefting a carton labeled Family Photos. Living room bookcase, I answer, watching as she navigates around Rowan's scattered Legos. We'll sort through them tonight. The lodge sold for nearly $2 million more than Marshall's valuation. The irony doesn't escape me. Derek's manipulation backfired spectacularly when Tessa's father learned the full story and made a generous offer through a subsidiary company. The proceeds funded this home, college accounts for both children, and seed money for Harwood Heritage Textiles, my now thriving business creating custom fabric installations for boutique hotels. I no longer check my phone for messages from my parents before making decisions. Our family photos now include Aunt Phoebe, her wife Clara, and their twin boys. Instead of seeking approval, I sign contracts and negotiate terms with my own signature. The trembling in my hands has finally stopped. 1 year after the mediation, I host Sunday dinner. Not in some sterile hotel banquet room, but here, in our home, filled with the scent of rosemary chicken and fresh-baked bread. The museum display lacks proper historical context, my father announces, scrutinizing the invitation to my textile exhibition propped on the mantel. I should speak with the curator about their obvious oversights. My mother nods. We could provide more appropriate sponsorship if they'd just. Dad, I interrupt, my voice quiet but firm. The exhibition celebrates women textile artists who built businesses during economic downturns. The curator and I have worked on this concept for months. Your input isn't needed. He blinks, surprised by my directness. Well, I only meant. I know exactly what you meant, I say, placing my hand on Rowan's shoulder as he enters with dessert plates. And this visit is now over. Sage will walk you to your car. They leave without protest, which would have seemed miraculous a year ago. Later, Phoebe raises her wine glass in our smaller, warmer gathering. Monica sits beside her, the attorney who became a friend after helping us secure our future. To the family we choose, Phoebe says, and the boundaries we protect. Rowan, who's been quieter since therapy began, looks up from his plate. Aunt Phoebe, did Grandpa always try to control everything even when you were kids? He did, she answers honestly. But control isn't love, sweetie. What your mom did took real courage. In my bedroom that evening, I hang our newest family portrait where I'll see it first thing each morning. The frame holds us all, Sage, poised beside her dance trophies, Rowan with his science fair ribbon, Phoebe and Clara with their boys, Monica with her partner. My hands remain steady as I adjust it to a perfect level. On my dresser sit tangible signs of our new path, college brochures. For Sage, who graduates in 2 years, Rowan's therapy progress notes showing steady improvement. The museum's invitation to exhibit my textile art in a traveling collection. As I arrange our new family photos, I wonder whether true forgiveness means allowing toxic people back into your life or simply finding peace with their absence. Is maintaining a relationship with difficult family members worth the cost, or is sometimes the healthiest legacy we can create one that begins with us?